6 years ago, they packed their bags, walked away from royal life, and boarded a plane for a new beginning 3,000 miles from Buckingham Palace. They called it independence. The tabloids called it betrayal. And for 6 long years, an ocean sat between Prince Harry and the family he was born into. But this week, something changed. Quietly, almost secretly, moving boxes are being packed again. 2 young children have been enrolled in British schools. And the King of England was reportedly told the news just days ago, in a phone call that may have changed the royal story forever. So what actually happened? Why now or after everything? And what does it mean for a family that has spent 6 years trying to explain, defend, and rebuild itself in the public eye? Stay with us, because this story is still unfolding, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why the world is calling it the biggest royal headline of the year. To understand why this week's news feels so seismic, you have to understand what the royal family represents. It isn't just a family, it's an institution. A brand. A symbol that has survived wars, scandals, and the deaths of monarchs, always projecting the same image: unity, duty, and quiet dignity. Which is exactly why, in January 2020, when a young prince and his American wife announced they were stepping back from royal life, it didn't just make headlines. It cracked the foundation of an institution that prides itself on never cracking at all. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, son of King Charles, grandson of the late Queen Elizabeth II, had spent his entire life inside the golden cage of the monarchy. Every relationship, every headline, every mistake, magnified by a press machine that had, in his eyes, already destroyed one member of his family, his mother, Princess Diana. Then came Meghan Markle. An American actress, self-made, outspoken, and entirely unfamiliar with the unwritten rules of royal life. Their courtship captivated the world. Their 2018 wedding was watched by millions. But almost from the beginning, cracks began to show, in the press coverage, in the palace dynamics, and eventually, in the relationship between Harry and the family he'd grown up in. By 2020, the fairy tale had become something else entirely, a story about escape. And for 6 years, that's exactly what it looked like. Harry and Meghan built a new life in Montecito, California, a wealthy coastal community north of Los Angeles, home to celebrities seeking privacy behind tall hedges and long driveways. They had 2 children there, Archie, now 7, and Lilibet, now 5. They built businesses. They gave interviews. They released documentaries and a best-selling memoir that pulled back the curtain on royal life in ways the family had never experienced before. It seemed, for years, like the distance between Montecito and London was not just physical, it was permanent. Until this week. To really appreciate the weight of this moment, we need to rewind the clock. Back in January 2020, Harry and Meghan's announcement stunned the world. In a carefully worded statement, they said they intended to step back as senior royals and work toward becoming financially independent, while still supporting the Queen. It was framed as evolution, not rebellion, a modern royal couple charting a new path. The British press did not see it that way. Almost overnight, the tabloids dubbed it Megxit, a name that stuck, and one that framed the entire departure as a rejection of Britain itself. Headlines turned brutal. Commentary questioned their motives, their finances, and their loyalty. Meghan, in particular, became the target of intense scrutiny, coverage she and Harry would later describe as containing racial undertones that the institution failed to protect her from. Within days of the announcement, Meghan had already left the UK for Canada. Harry stayed briefly to fulfill a handful of remaining duties before following her. By spring, the split was formal. They lost their Her Royal Highness title's official usage, gave up royal patronages, and by 2020's end, had settled permanently in Montecito. What followed were years that redefined what it meant to leave the royal family in the modern media age. There was the tell-all interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2021, where Meghan described feeling suicidal during her time as a working royal, and where the couple alleged that a family member had raised concerns about how dark their unborn son's skin might be, an allegation that sent shockwaves through the monarchy and forced an unusually direct public response from the palace. There was the Netflix docuseries in 2022, which laid out their version of events in 6 unflinching episodes. There was Harry's memoir, Spare, released in January 2023, a book that broke publishing records and broke royal precedent, revealing private family disputes, physical altercations, and deeply personal grievances that had never before been spoken about publicly by a royal insider. And there was the ongoing legal battle, Harry's fight over his UK security arrangements. After stepping back as a working royal, his automatic government-funded protection was downgraded. Harry sued, arguing that the decision put his family at risk whenever they visited Britain. He lost his legal challenge, a defeat that many royal watchers believe became one of the central reasons the family stayed away from the UK for as long as they did. Every visit home became complicated, 30 days' notice required to Scotland Yard, arrangements made on a case-by-case basis, no guarantee of the protection every other senior royal receives as a matter of course. Meanwhile, back in Britain, the family itself was changing. Queen Elizabeth II passed away in September 2022, ending a 70-year reign and placing Charles on the throne. Then, in 2024, King Charles was diagnosed with cancer, followed by a similar diagnosis for the Princess of Wales, Catherine. The royal family, already thinner in working members than it had been in generations, was suddenly facing its own health crises, forcing a family already strained by distance to confront questions of mortality and time running out. Through it all, Harry made occasional visits to Britain, for his father's coronation, for court appearances, for charity events, but always brief, always guarded, and always without Meghan or the children in tow for most of them. The distance, in other words, wasn't just physical anymore. It had become symbolic of a relationship that many assumed might never fully heal. Which is what makes this week's announcement so extraordinary. Let's walk through exactly how this story broke, because the timeline itself tells you almost as much as the decision does. In July of this year, Harry and Meghan made a family visit to the UK. On the surface, it looked like any other trip, low-key, private, largely shielded from the press. But behind closed doors, something significant happened. The couple reportedly met with King Charles and Queen Camilla at Highgrove, the King's private country residence in Gloucestershire. For royal watchers, this meeting carried enormous weight. It marked one of the clearest signs yet that the King was willing to engage directly with his estranged son, rather than through intermediaries and lawyers. According to those close to the family, that meeting may have quietly set the wheels in motion for what came next. But at the time, no one, not even, apparently, inside the palace, knew a permanent move was on the table. Then came this past weekend. Sources say that King Charles was informed of the couple's decision to relocate just days ago, a conversation that reportedly took him somewhat by surprise, since the move had not been part of the discussion during their July visit at all. In other words, whatever shifted in the weeks between that Highgrove meeting and now, it moved quickly. By Wednesday evening, the story broke publicly. British outlets The Telegraph and The Sun were first to report it, quickly followed by a cascade of confirmations from NBC News, CNN, ABC News, The Washington Post, and NPR, a level of near-simultaneous, cross-Atlantic confirmation that told the world this wasn't rumor. This was real. According to those reports, the plan is this: Harry and Meghan intend to relocate to a private residence outside London, not a royal residence, and notably, not a return to any official role within the monarchy. Their children, Archie and Lilibet, have reportedly already been enrolled in British schools ahead of the new academic term, which typically begins in early September. Given that timeline, reporters covering the story suggest the family's actual move could happen within a matter of days, perhaps even before this video reaches your screen. Importantly, several details separate this from a simple visit. The couple is reportedly not disbanding their business ventures, Archie Productions, their media company, and as ever, Meghan's lifestyle brand, are expected to continue operating largely as they have been. They're also said to be keeping their Montecito home, suggesting this isn't necessarily framed as a permanent, irreversible severing of their American life, at least not yet. Some reports describe the transition as being for an extended period, rather than a stated forever. And crucially, because this detail matters enormously to how the palace is likely to respond, multiple outlets have reported that Harry and Meghan will not resume any official royal duties. They will remain private citizens, non-working members of the family. There will be no return to public engagements on behalf of the Crown, no reinstatement of official patronages in the way they once held them. This is, by every indication, a personal decision about family, not a professional return to the firm, as royal insiders often call the institution. Which brings us to the question hanging over the entire story: security. For years, this has been the single most contentious, most complicated issue standing between Harry and any meaningful return to Britain. Without the automatic police protection given to senior working royals, Harry has relied on privately funded security during his visits, a costly and, in his view, legally unjust arrangement, given the very real threats his family has faced. At the time of this report, it remains unclear exactly what security arrangement will be in place for the family's return. Some analysts believe the fact that Harry is willing to relocate his children full-time to the UK suggests he may finally feel more confident in whatever protective measures have been discussed, possibly connected to an ongoing government review of his case that has been unfolding behind the scenes for months. But as of now, no official confirmation on the security details has been made public. As for the palace's official response, it has been notably measured. Statements relayed through sources close to the king indicate that Charles welcomes the opportunity to see more of the Sussex family in what's being described as a private, personal capacity. The messaging has been careful to emphasize that this move does not change Harry and Meghan's status as non-working members of the royal family, a subtle but important signal that the institution wants the public to understand. This is a family reunion, not a professional reinstatement. So to summarize the sequence of events, a quiet family visit and a significant father-son meeting in July. A decision reportedly made afterward, outside of that conversation. A phone call to the king just days ago. A leak to the British press by Wednesday evening. A wave of confirmation from international outlets by Thursday morning. And now, a family reportedly packing for a move that could happen within 2 weeks. 6 years of distance, collapsing, seemingly, within the space of a single summer. As you might expect, a story like this doesn't just make headlines, it ignites them. Within hours of the news breaking, it dominated the front pages of nearly every major British newspaper. This wasn't a small item buried in a royal gossip column. This was the story. Splashed across broadsheets and tabloids alike, from outlets that have spent years fiercely critical of the couple to those that have remained more sympathetic. Commentators wasted no time speculating about motive. Some framed it as a long overdue reconciliation, a son finally coming home to be closer to an aging, ailing father. Others were more skeptical, questioning whether the timing has more to do with practical matters. A legal case, a business decision, or simply a desire for their children to grow up with closer ties to their English heritage. On social media, reaction split almost exactly along the same lines that have defined public opinion on Harry and Meghan since 2020. Supporters framed the move as brave and overdue, a family choosing connection over pride, healing over further estrangement. Critics, meanwhile, were quick to point out the irony. A couple who left, citing intolerable press intrusion, are now returning to the very media environment they once said drove them out. British talk radio, always a reliable barometer for how the tabloid class is reacting, lit up almost instantly, with hosts and callers debating everything from Meghan's public image to whether the family will actually be welcomed back with open arms, or simply given a fresh round of scrutiny dressed up as celebration. It's worth noting, too, just how loaded this cultural moment has become. The Sussexes have, for years, occupied a strange dual identity in British public life, simultaneously tabloid fixtures and tabloid targets, celebrated and criticised often within the same news cycle. Their return doesn't erase that dynamic. If anything, many royal commentators expect it to intensify it, at least in the short term, as every school run, grocery run, or public sighting becomes fresh material for a press that has spent 6 years starved of access. There's also a quieter, more human layer to the public reaction, one less about tabloid drama and more about family. For many observers, the emotional core of this story isn't Harry and Meghan at all. It's King Charles. A monarch in his late 70s, having weathered his own cancer diagnosis, watching his grandchildren grow up largely through video calls and rare visits. For a man whose public role often overshadows his private one, the idea of simply being closer to two of his grandchildren carries an emotional weight that transcends royal politics. Whether the public chooses to see this as reconciliation, strategy, or something in between, one thing is certain. The world is watching this homecoming far more closely than any other family's move across an ocean. To understand what this move really signals, it helps to bring in the perspective of royal historians and commentators who've tracked this family for years. Several royal experts point to the security issue as the linchpin of the entire situation. For years, the unresolved dispute over Harry's police protection wasn't just a legal technicality. It was, in many ways, the practical wall standing between the Sussexes and any meaningful time in Britain. Every visit required extensive planning, private security costs that reportedly ran into significant sums, and constant uncertainty. Commentators suggest that if Harry is now comfortable enough to relocate his young children full-time, it strongly implies that behind the scenes, meaningful progress has been made on that front, even if the details haven't yet been made public. There's also the matter of what royal watchers often call optics versus reality. On paper, nothing about Harry and Meghan's formal status is changing. They remain non-working royals. They won't appear on the palace balcony for state occasions. They won't take on new patronages or resume official duties. But symbolically, the impact of simply living in the same country as the rest of the family is enormous. Proximity changes everything. Spontaneous visits, shared holidays, the kind of ordinary family contact that 6 years and thousands of miles made nearly impossible. Royal historians also point to timing as deeply significant. King Charles's health remains a subject of quiet concern within royal circles, even as he continues to carry out his duties. For a father in his position, the calculus around reconciliation may simply have changed, the value of more time with his son and grandchildren outweighing whatever institutional caution might have counseled patience in years past. It's also worth noting how this fits into a broader pattern for the modern monarchy. Under Charles, the royal family has operated with a noticeably smaller circle of working members than in previous generations, a deliberate slimmed-down monarchy, a model he has favored for years. Some analysts suggest this shift may make more room, ironically, for Harry and Meghan to exist near the family without the same institutional pressure to define exactly what their role should be. They can simply be family, without the added complication of being colleagues within the firm. At the same time, expert commentary remains cautious about reading too much healing into a single decision. Relationships fractured over years of public grievance, allegations of racism, mental health crises, memoirs revealing private conversations, don't repair overnight simply because two families now live in the same country. Several commentators have been careful to describe this as a step, not a resolution. Living nearer to the family creates opportunity for reconciliation. It does not guarantee it. And then there's William, the heir to the throne, and by most accounts, the family member whose relationship with Harry has suffered the deepest and most public rupture. Notably absent from most of the reporting around this reunion is any indication of a parallel thaw between the two brothers. Whatever warmth may be building between Harry and his father does not appear, at least publicly, to extend yet to the brother he once called his best friend. So while royal watchers broadly agree this is a meaningful, even historic development, the consensus is measured. This is the beginning of a new chapter, not necessarily its resolution. As it stands right now, here's what we actually know for certain. Harry and Meghan are relocating from Montecito, California, to a private residence outside London. Their children, Archie and Lilibet, are enrolled in British schools ahead of the upcoming academic term, which strongly suggests the physical move itself will happen within a matter of days from the initial reports. King Charles was informed of the decision only very recently, and by all accounts, was not part of the conversation during the family's July visit. Meaning this decision appears to have solidified quickly, likely over the following weeks. The palace's public posture has been warm but carefully worded. The king welcomes more time with the Sussex family in a personal capacity, while palace messaging has been clear that this does not represent any change to Harry and Meghan's status as non-working members of the royal family. Unanswered, for now, are the exact details of the family security arrangement. Arguably the single most important practical question determining how comfortably, and how long-term, this relocation will actually function. Also unclear is exactly how frequently the public might expect to see the Sussexes, whether any private meetings with other family members, particularly Prince William, might eventually follow, and how the notoriously intense British press will behave once the family is no longer an ocean away, but living just outside the capital. What we do know is this: after 6 years of distance, headlines, legal battles, and public grievance aired for the entire world to witness, geography, for the first time since 2020, is no longer standing between this family and each other. Whatever happens next, it will be happening much closer to home. 6 years ago, a young prince and his wife made a decision that shocked the world. Stepping away from centuries of tradition to build something new, an ocean away from the palace walls that had shaped Harry's entire life. What followed was one of the most publicly dissected family ruptures in modern history: interviews, documentaries, a best-selling memoir, legal battles, and a public relationship with the tabloid press that swung between fascination and fury. But families, even royal ones, are rarely defined by a single decision. They're shaped by all the moments that come after, the quiet meetings no one hears about, the phone calls made in private, the slow, imperfect process of two people trying to find their way back to each other. This week's news doesn't erase 6 years of distance. It doesn't undo what's been said, written, or aired publicly for the world to dissect. But it does mark something undeniably significant: a physical closing of the gap that, for so long, seemed unlikely to ever close at all. Whether this becomes the beginning of a genuine reconciliation, or simply a new chapter in a story that continues to evolve on its own terms, one thing is certain: the world will be watching every step of this homecoming, just as closely as it watched them leave. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the biggest royal stories of the year, make sure to hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love royal history and modern royal drama just as much as you do. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over, and we'll be covering every new development the moment it happens. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think this move signals real reconciliation between Harry and the royal family, or is it simply a practical decision dressed up as a family reunion? Let's discuss it down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.